Okay, so we talked about a couple of hinges, also known as cromlech, remember, which are circular formations of megaliths, so big stones in circular formations, hinges, cromlech, in Britain. Now, remaining in the British Isles, we're going to go north, very north, to Scotland. Particularly, we're going to go to a series of islands called the Outer Hebrides. So the Outer Hebrides are off the coast of Ireland in the northwest. And we have the Isle of Skye is kind of the famous one, and then we have the Isle of Lewis. The Isle of Lewis is fairly remote. There's a couple of villages, but from my experience, and it's been about, it's actually been over 20 years since I was there, so it's been quite a long time. But in my experience, I remember there being like one main road that went all the way around the island, and it was one lane with little pull-off areas, so if someone was coming the other direction, you could get out of the way. And lots of sheep. There are some towns, some little cities on Lewis, but the area of Lewis where I was interested in going, which was to see Callanish, mostly sheep in my experience. But again, that's been a long time ago, so it maybe there's way more people there now. I'm not sure. Okay, Callanish, which is also spelled C-A-L-L-A-N-A-I-S. Callanish, the way I have it on this slide, is kind of the more sort of Americanized spelling of it. So this predates Stonehenge, okay? So this is a megalithic formation. It isn't so much a hinge, there's just kind of a hinge toward the center, but it's actually a cruciform shape. So it's in this kind of cross shape, which is interesting because it predates Christianity by a lot. The stones were placed around 5,000 years ago. So, more than 3,000 years prior to the dawn of Christianity. So the fact that it's in this cruciform shape is kind of interesting, but is not related to that. So that's something that's a little confusing to people. Occasionally. So, 5,000 years old. It's an important site for rituals and meetings for around 2,000 years. It's in active use, and then it becomes more or less abandoned. Like Stonehenge, scholars believe this was some kind of astrological tool, but rather than relating to the sun, they think it had more to do with the moon. It's quite mysterious. If you Google it, if you look it up, it's hard to find a lot of information about its purpose and its origins. Apparently, every 18.6 years, when looking at this from the side, it looks like the moon kind of skims along the top of the stones. So the thought is that this is something to do with tracking a sort of dancing pattern of the moon through the sky, perhaps, is something to do with the arrangement. But that's really unknown, and that's a pretty, I don't personally think it's super likely. It seems like a really obscure amount of time, 18.6 years. Anyway, it's a fantastic site. It's really pretty incredible. So I was lucky enough to visit this site, and like I said, when I was there were mostly sheep. I got chased by a sheep with horns, a ram actually, because my friend ran up to it and took a picture in its face, and it did not like that. But when we got to these standing stones, there wasn't really anyone you could check in with or anything. I think there is like a visitor center and gift shop and stuff now, but at the time you could just kind of walk right up to them and touch them. I'm not sure that we were supposed to, but we totally did. And when we wandered into that middle area, that one extremely large standing stone in the center, and put our hands on it, and this is a very windy, kind of rainy, cold Scottish environment, that stone was warm to the touch, which was pretty interesting. So it was a really interesting experience. It's kind of a very surreal setting because you're in this fairly isolated place, and then you walk up and find these stones, which is why we were there. So very intentionally finding. But it's a very interesting experience. They're very beautiful. They're huge, very, very tall, and they are just sort of shrouded in mystery a lot. Okay, so we're now going to hop over to Ireland, okay? So in Ireland, I want to look at a really great example of a passage tomb. So we see passage tombs around the British Isles and Ireland in this time period, in the Neolithic time period. We briefly looked at the front of one in the last lecture, which was the Kent long barrow. So a long barrow and a passage tomb are very similar things. This is New Grange. This is in Drogheda, Ireland, and it's about 5,200 years old, and it's in the Boyne Valley area in Eastern Ireland. The mounded part of it, the mound itself, is 279 feet in diameter, so quite large, and it's 43 feet high in the middle, so it's very tall in the middle, which is kind of interesting also. The full area that it covers is about an acre. You can see there are people for scale here, but you can also see there are stones around the outside. There was kind of a hinge around it. Some of those stones are now missing, but they're called herbstones, and some of them are engraved. Okay, so you can go into this thing, and I was there. I was when I went here, I was a student in London studying art and architectural history, and my parents came to visit, and so my mom really wanted to go to New Grange, so we went. And we went in it, and she got rather claustrophobic and had to back out because it's quite tight. People were much shorter back then, so you have to kind of scrunch down to go into this thing. And it's a very long passage, so it's not like a short little hall. It is 62 feet long, so that's a pretty long ways to walk in this very tight area. So you walk all the way down this 62-foot long passage, and it ends with 3 alcoves, and it's thought that those alcoves are where people were buried. Remains of people, bones have been found there. It also has a kind of astrological calendar type connection. So the passage and the chamber align with the rising sun on winter solstice. So on winter solstice, which is around December 21st or 20th each year, the sun perfectly aligns as it rises and hits that little chamber above the door, and it illuminates all the way down to the alcove in the back. So again, we have this interest in a relationship between the celestial bodies, the moon, the sun, that kind of thing, and the calendar, okay? And as I said, there are these herbstones around the outside. There are 97 of them, and many of them have interesting kinds of engravings. So this is the kind of headstone here at the front, in front of the entrance, and it has this triple spiral, which is pretty popular. My mom actually has this tattooed on her shoulder. So we see these kind of abstract patterning, and there's been a lot of thought about what that represents, and it's really unknown at this time, but it's pretty interesting. So that is a quick view of a couple more examples of Neolithic monuments in the British Isles and Ireland, and then next we're going to go to the Middle East and talk about the rise of civilization.